Let's get going. Okay, so actually what you need to see to start with is this. There are no slides. So this is me, and if you want to get here, you can scan this code, but I will also show you this again at the very end, and I'll show you the GitHub repo for this talk and everything about it. So we will cover that at the end. So to begin with, hi, I'm Ross. Thank you very much for coming here tonight, and thank you very much to Clearbank for providing this office, providing the pizza, the beer, and also, importantly, for providing me with a job, because I started here 2 weeks ago. Now, I didn't actually realise it at the time, but when I proposed this talk back in August, the gears were already in motion that we're going to end up with this talk being here. I'm pretty glad that I then got the job that I applied for in September, seeing the person that interviewed me is in this room right now. It would have been pretty embarrassing if I didn't get the job. So thank you for giving me a job. I haven't passed my redundancy quite yet though, so you might want to hold on to that for 6 months. Right, okay, so the talk tonight is about an app that I have been working on. It's still in the proof of concept stage at the moment, and it's gone through 4 proof of concepts. The first one being written in Angular, because that's something that I can do quickly and easily and I was comfortable with. I really wanted to do it in Blazor, so that was going to be my next one. But before I did that, I decided I would relearn React because it's been a while since I had done anything in React. And I got to say that I really fell back in love with React. React's really nice. I know this is a Blazor talk, but I really appreciated how good React was, and I spent a little bit too much time on React before I then moved on to Blazor. Then I moved on to Blazor and I made a lot of mistakes very early on. So this is the app, and I'll show you the app in a minute. It's called Gym Tracker, and it's for me, it's not for anyone else. So if you submit a pull request, I'll probably ignore it because this is exactly what I want rather than anyone else. So I did my first one in Angular, then moved on to React, and then did a Blazor app. I'm not going to scroll any further because it's going to give a few secrets away. But let's take a look at the app first of all and show you what I'm trying to do at the moment. And I've just remembered I made one of the speaker mistakes of not starting Zoomit. So let me just do that first of all. Are we running? There we go. Right, and let me just go back to where I was for later. Okay, so this is the app that I've been working on. It's going to run on either an iPad or an Android device, and I'm going to use it for tracking my gym sessions. It's got a list of different exercises on the left-hand side, and then the breakdown of the sets and the target weight and reps. If I've achieved what my target was, I can just tick and it fills in the details for me. But if I did something different, then I can click on it and edit the details in here. So I can say that I only achieved 7 reps on that particular one. Now, the bit that we're actually interested in for tonight is this timer section down here. This is what we're going to try and implement. And this is actually the first thing that I tried to implement myself and actually discovered issues as I was trying to do this. This is the sort of thing that we can get done in about an hour. It sounds quite simple, but when you're talking and writing code, then that's about the limit for tonight. So just to show you, it's a timer, you click start, it starts counting down, and we can pause and reset it. The only thing we're going to implement tonight is the start button. Okay, so The talk's going to be broken up into two sections. The first section is going to be taking you through the journey of mistakes that I made, and then I'm going to tell you there's a better way, and then we're going to stop and we're going to get another beer and any cold leftover pizza that's left, and then we'll come back after about 5 minutes and then I'll show you the better way. So that's how we're going to structure it. So the first bit's going to be roughly 40 minutes. And then, so about a 5 minute break, and then the second bit will be roughly 20 minutes, something like that. So it's probably actually 2/3, 1/3, something like that. During this talk, if you disagree with me or you've got a question, then feel free to bring it up straight away. Let's have a discussion about it. I am not an expert in Blazor. What I'm telling you is the mistakes that I've made. I'm not necessarily telling you or showing you any particular expertise in the subject. It's more about these are some of the pitfalls to avoid. All of the code is in GitHub, and it's all been branched as well. So each step that I'm going to take you through is a separate branch in GitHub, so you can follow the journey that we go through tonight. You can also follow the journey in GitHub of all the mistakes that I've made in all of the proof of concepts, because they're all there as well. Okay, so to start with, we're going to create a new progressive web application in Blazor, but I want to point you straight in the direction of Blazor, which is a material design component library which is open source, which I highly recommend as a good starting point if you haven't heard of it before. Like a lot of component libraries, it doesn't do 100% of what you want, but it is going to do a lot of the things that you need, and then you just got to do that little tweaking at the end. Now, if we just quickly explore Blazor and just scroll through some of the components that we have in here, then you can see that we've got different layouts, we've got different buttons. If I pick something like the time picker and then just click on it, you can see we get quite a nice picker here. So this is quite nice stuff. It doesn't do a second picker at the moment, as in picking how many seconds you want, which is a little bit annoying. The enum's there, but it doesn't actually do it. So if I was a good open source citizen, I'd go in and actually do that. I've just started a new job and bit tired at the moment. I will do sometime. Okay, so going back to say just a button. If we look at the documentation here, it gives you the different examples, and it also shows you the API as well. So if I click on the API and then click on callbacks, then I can see that we get an on-click event. So you've got all of the information here. It's really, really, really useful. So to get going with Blazor, you can install a template, and it gives you the instructions here of .NET new install template, or you can just do a manual installation, add the NuGet packages yourself. Now I've already installed the template here, so if I go down to Visual Studio and create a new project, I'll just take you through what we'll see. So I create a new project, and I'm going to pick Blazor as the template, and it's going to be template free and proof of concept. That's fine. I'm actually going to abandon this at the end because I've got everything in source control, and I want to use the branches as my get out of jail for free card when I've written the code wrong. So we'll move into that one. This is going to be a WebAssembly project, which means that it's going to be running in the client on the device. In my case, an Android tablet. I'm not going to be talking about server-side Blazor today. It does exist, and there's other flavors as well, like in Maui now, but I'm going to concentrate purely on WebAssembly. So let's create this project. Now, by default, this creates exactly the same layout that you get if you create a Blazor project to begin with. So the demo that you've seen 100 times before is the same what you're going to get here. So I'm not going to run that because I don't want to show you a demo code. What we're going to do is we're going to go in and we're going to tidy things up straight away and just run it just to prove that we can. So by default, it's given us a pages folder. Now, anyone that's worked client side knows that this isn't really the way that you do anything anymore. It's much better to break down your application into features and then group all of the classes, all of the UI together for that particular feature. So I am going to hit delete. And I'm going to add in a folder called features. And then inside the features folder, I'm going to create a folder called home. And then I'm going to add the home component into here. So that's a razor component. I would call it home. Okay, so now because this is a page, we need to tell Blazor this is a page rather than just a component. So I'm going to do @page, and then I'm going to tell it that this is in the this is the root page. So that's given Blazor everything it needs to know. Now I really like this syntax. I really like defining this within the components itself rather than having a separate page like you do in Angular or React, where you say this is the URL and it maps to this particular component. Here we've got all the information in one place, and you can have multiple routes going to the same component in here, and you can have parameters, and the values of those parameters can be injected into your code. So it's a really nice model, and I think it's an improvement on both what Angular and React do. There's a few things that we need to get rid of, so we don't need this nav menu, so I'm going to delete that. And then in the layout, we don't care really about all this layout at the moment. The only thing I want in here is the body, so I'm going to get that, and I'm going to remove everything apart from these providers at the top, because they just help you with a few things in Mud Blazor. So if you want to display notifications, you want to display a dialog, you need these providers in here. One other thing that it's done by default is in the program file, it's added in the service here. So again, that's for useful things like displaying notifications and stuff. So hopefully if we run it up now, we will get a home screen which says just home, and that's it. So let's just prove that we have got that. We have. That's good. Right, so we've got a starting point where we could then start building out some components from there. So as I said, I'm going to abandon this project now, and I'm going to go to the here's one I made earlier, which is exactly the same. So let me just check to make sure that I'm on the right branch. I'm on getting started. Okay, so we can move on from here. We've got exactly the same as what you've just seen, and we're going to start adding in some features now. So I mentioned before we're going to add this timer in. So let's start building a little bit of structure to begin with. So I'm going to create a new feature which is called session. So this is our gym session, and inside the gym session we are going to have a number of components. So we are going to have a countdown timer, razor component. We are going to have a sidebar component, and we are going to have a session component, and that will do for now. Okay, so let's fill out a little bit of detail in the countdown timer component to begin with. So I'm going to change the header to a H4, and I'm then going to define a time remaining value. So this is going to be a time span, and I'm going to call it time remaining, and I'm going to just default it to 2 minutes and 30 seconds just to get going, and then let's bind that to a H2. So let's put in a H2, and I'm going to use the @ symbol to access the variables that we got. So it's time remaining, and I'm just going to do a toString. Now, if you come to John Skeet's talk next month, you're probably going to learn how what I've just done is a crime against humanity or something like that. But for now, we haven't heard of Node time, and we can be blissfully unaware of it. So let's just carry on with our naivety right now, and I'm just going to format it to minutes, seconds, and milliseconds. So hopefully that should be good enough to get going. Let me just double check that. That's right. Okay, so we've got our countdown timer that's just got a hard-coded value for now. So let's put our countdown timer in the sidebar. So let's put in here the countdown timer, and that's that. That's nice and simple. And then in the session, well, this is going to be the main section. So if we just go back and have a look at the page and just remind ourselves, we've got the sidebar down here, we've got the timer, and then we've got this main section here. So let's go to Blazor and let's go to the oops, what did I do? I stopped presenting, didn't I? I hate it when that pops up. Am I presenting again? Yeah. Good. Right, we're going to go to the wireframe section, and in here, this is the layout that we want. So I'm going to just expand the code here, and I'm going to copy the layout in here because that's what we want for this section. So let's go back to let me just hide that. Let's go back to the code. Thank you. Cheers. And in the session, let's paste in this layout. Now, I don't need this header here, so I'm just going to get rid of that. We don't need the menu in here. What we do need in here is the sidebar. Let's put that in. And we don't need the body in there at the moment. Now, I don't want this drawer to be toggleable, if that's a word. So I'm going to hard code it to open. So I'm just going to do open equals true. And I'm going to get rid of this on click event because we don't need to deal with toggling. Right, so hopefully that is everything that we need to actually show the main section of our application. The one last thing that we need to do is we need a way of navigating to it from the home screen. So if we go to the home screen, we're going to want to put a button in here, and then we're going to want to navigate to it. So let's go back to Blazor again, and let's go to the button section, and we're just going to copy a primary button, and let's paste that into our code. So let's put that as start session. Right, so in order to navigate, we're going to need to inject the navigation manager. So I'm going to write inject and then navigation manager, and I will just call it navigation manager. So now we've got a navigation manager injected, I can write a handler for the click event, and then I can use that navigation manager. So let's create a handler. So I will call it handle start session. And in here we will do navigation, navigate to, and it is the session that we want to navigate to. So let's wire that up. So in here we're going to use the click event, and we are going to handle the start session. Now, one thing that I haven't done is I haven't defined session as a page on the session razor bit. So let's go up to there, and let's do @page is session. Right, so that should be all the information that we need now. So let's run this up and see if the demo gods are happy with me. Blazor uses Razor syntax. So Razor syntax is something that you can just use in normal ASP.NET as well. So it just uses the same syntax. So let's start session. Right, so we've got our main layout here. We've got our countdown timer. It's not going to do anything at the moment. And we've got our main section. So that's starting to look like the application that we want. So the next thing that we want to do is to actually implement the timer section. So let's actually give that a go. Now, there's a reasonable amount of code in here which I don't particularly fancy writing in front of everyone. So I am going to jump to page-based timer, and we will take a look at what we've got in here. I'll just talk you through this bit. So in the countdown timer, I've now defined a time remaining, a start duration, because we're going to need to know what time was on the timer to begin with. We're going to use an actual timer, which is going to tick at 1 millisecond. We're obviously going to need a handler, so we create a handler, and in that handler we're just going to do some simple maths to calculate the time remaining from when we started it. There's no logic in here to prevent it going past 0, so it will start counting up once we're done. When we click on the start button, then it's going to take a snapshot of the start time, and then it's going to start the timer. So this is all quite simple stuff that hopefully you don't need me to write in front of you. So I'm going to press F5 and we'll see what happens now. No, I'm good, thank you. Cheers. Okay, so let's click start session and let's click start, and absolutely nothing happens. This is exactly what happened for me, and it was quite easy to make a guess at what this is. The most logical answer here is that Blazor doesn't know that something's being updated in the background. We're probably going to have to tell it about that, because it hasn't happened as part of a direct click and then a value changes. It was click, I started a timer, and then a value is changing in the background at some point. But I don't quite know what the real answer is yet. So the best thing to do is to Google it. So let's do that. But obviously we're not going to Google it because this is 2023, not 2022. We're going to chat it. So let's talk to Chat GPT. I'm not going to say Chat GPT anymore because I can't. I'm going to chat it. So how does Blazor update the UI? Let's see what result we get here. I'm going to just let this play out, and then we will discuss the answer that it's given, because the answer that it's given is brilliant. It's so concise. This is really, really impressive stuff. So I am going to pause it once it finishes talking. This is going to come back again. We're going to be talking about this quite a bit. But let's take a look at the thing that it's telling us here. So it tells us that it uses change detection. And the way that it does that is by taking a look at the component's properties for any state. So you can set properties on a component, and if those properties change, then the component knows that it's going to have to re-render. It could also happen through a user interaction. So if you click a button and you change a value, then clearly the UI is going to need to be re-rendered. So Blazor knows that. It knows it's done a user interaction and it's going to update it. But it then goes on to give us a hint, and this is a really, really nice hint. So the framework uses a light weight algorithm to determine if anything needs to be updated, which helps you minimize the amount of work that needs to be done to improve performance. Do not try and prematurely optimize your code, because Blazor is really, really, really good at doing that for you. And you don't need to start trying to second guess on rendering. Just allow Blazor to make the decision on what needs to be updated. It's going to calculate the changes and then it's going to update just that bit of the DOM that needs to be done. The only time that you need to start worrying about performance is if you've done something really bad, or you're perhaps trying to display millions of rows and allow the user to scroll through it, in which case you're going to need to use something like the data grid that has got optimizations built into it for dealing with those kind of things. But I really, really like that answer because it, not only is it giving you the right answer, but it's also pointing you in the right direction as well for being a good developer. So I think this is an interesting tool, and we're, as I said, we'll come back to this in a little bit. So. I mentioned that we need to tell Blazor that the state has changed, and that is exactly what we are going to do. So state has changed. That is all we need to do to tell it that it needs to re-render this component. There's one other mistake that I've got in here, which is that I haven't written a dispose method. Now, I've wired up an event here for the timer. If I don't dispose of that handler, then you're going to get a memory leak in Blazor, so you do need to do any tidying up. So we can just easily add in a public void dispose, and in there we will do timer dot elapsed minus equals untimer elapsed, and that's it. So now we're being a good citizen. So let's run this again, and hopefully we will get a update. Start session, start. It's counting down. As I said, there's no logic in here, so once it's got to 0, it's going to start counting up again. But this is updating every 1 millisecond, and you can see that the performance here is perfectly fine. So there's nothing really to worry about here. Okay, so let's go. Yeah. It's just a convention, yeah, that that Blazor looks for a dispose method. When we get to there's a better way, you're not going to have to worry about this anymore, but for now you are going to have to worry about it. Right, let's go back to the application and show you a new requirement that I've got. When I tick that I've completed a session, what I'd really like to happen is that this timer automatically starts counting down for the rest interval that I'm going to do between sets. So that might be something like 2.5 minutes, 3 minutes, something like that, depending on what exercise I'm doing. So what we've got here now is a requirement that a component, what am I doing? Where's that? Oh. Right, sorry. Yeah, a component here, when you click on it, is going to have to some way communicate to a completely different component down here. If you think about the layout that we've got going on in here, we have got a, where's my mouse? It's gone. I'm going to just try that again. Right, so we've got a component here. We've got a, the mouse is gone again. There we go. We have got a component here, and then we've got another component within it. Now, one of the approaches that you could take here, which sometimes you do in Angular, is that the main component here will bubble up an event that will go up to the parent, and then this parent will talk to this child, and then this child will talk to this child, and it will learn about that I need to start. And that will work, but you're really tightly coupling your components here. And if you were to add in another component outside of this tree that also wants to perhaps communicate with the timer or do something else when the timer's happening, perhaps you want a notification that gets triggered when the timer starts or something like that, or when it finishes, then you're going to be in for quite a lot of pain doing that. So in Angular, the other approach that you would take is you would create a service, and that service would be injected into any component that either wants to raise an event or listen to an event, and then that way things remain loosely coupled, but you've got strong cohesion, which is what we want. If we Google this, then we'll discover that Microsoft is going to point us in the same direction. So I'm going to Google Blazor Management. Now, what I'm not going to do here is I'm not going to chat it, because if I chat it right now, it's going to completely ruin my talk. It's going to tell you exactly what my talk is. And in fact, if I had done that before I started this talk, I probably wouldn't have bothered doing this talk, because I'd be like, well, what's the point of you even coming here? You might as well just talk to a stupid AI, and it knows better than I do. So I'm glad I didn't. I confidently carried on and produced the this presentation, and you'll discover at the end that it was completely pointless, and you should have just spoken to chat. So don't worry, I've got some more points of view on that subject. So if we click on this advice from Microsoft about state management, we get a little bit of blah, blah, blah at the beginning, but what they tell us is exactly the same as what I mentioned we do in Angular, which is an in-memory container service. So let's look at their suggestion here. So is that readable? Shall I just zoom in a little bit? There we go. So we've got a state container here. We've got an action down here, which is on change. And whenever this property is set, then it's going to call notify change, which is going to invoke the change. So any component that has subscribed to the on change action is going to get notified anytime this property changes. So that seems like a good idea. That's quite a good implementation. So let's go ahead and implement that. Now again, you don't necessarily want to see me writing a timer service, because it's pretty basic stuff and everyone can do something like that. So let's jump to which one is state service, and let's take a look at what we've got here. So this is where the feature folders comes in handy, because we can now define this state service that we've got in the same folder as the things that are going to be consuming it. So rather than having a folder that's called services and then you have to go there each time and you can't quite remember what it's called, everything's together. So just like Microsoft told us, we are defining a on-state change action. We've got the same properties that we had inside our Razor class before. So we've got our start duration, our time, we've got our timer. We have a time remaining that can be read, but we don't want it to be set publicly. We only want this one to be read. We've got our timer elapsed as normal, and then we've got our start timer. Now we've got two different types of start timer now. We've got just start the timer with whatever value is on it, or we've got start the timer with this particular duration, which is what we want for when we're waiting between exercise sets. So that's everything that we need in here. So what we now need to do is wire this up to a few different places. So the first thing that we're going to do is wire it up in dependency injection. So let's take a copy of the name and let's go into the program and let's just add that in. So builder.services.add scopes. Right, now I'm adding it as scopes Now, in reality, because this is running in the client on a device, there is only one instance of this app. There aren't multiple users using this app. So although I've defined it as scoped, it's actually going to be a singleton. So you might ask, why have you not defined it as a singleton? The reason is if you then reuse this code server side, then having it as a singleton, you would now get into a lot of pain because everyone would have the same instance. You would want it scoped on server side. So just to be on the safe side, define it as scoped, and then you won't get into any pain in the future. So let's go to our timer now, and let's wire things up. So we can get rid of quite a lot of stuff in here now. We can get rid of these values. We can get rid of calculating the time. We need a handle start, but it's going to call into our service. We don't need that. We don't need elapsed. We will need to dispose. So the first thing we need to do is inject our service. So I'm going to use the inject, and I'm going to define the state service, and I'm going to call it state. Actually, I'll call it timer state. Okay, so now we can use our timer state in a few different places. So I can replace the time remaining now with timer state dot time remaining, and everything else stays the same. For handle start, we're going to do timer state dot start timer, and we need to subscribe still to the updates, but this time we don't need to actually do anything apart from tell Blazor that there is an update. So if I handle the on state change, I'm just going to do state has changed, and that will tell Blazor state has changed. And then again in the unsubscribe, then we are going to do minus equals. So that should be everything wired up in here to get going. I'll just check my code. The only other place that we need to wire it up is in the main section. So let's go to there so we can communicate with this page. So if I go to the main session, I've got a little bit of HTML in here now for just laying out a fake set. And so I will just inject the timer state into here, and I will create a handler which I will call handle toggle completed, and in there I'm going to do timer dot start, but this time I'm going to pass in a value. So I'm going to do start timer, and I'm going to give it a new time span of, let's say, 3 minutes and 20 seconds. Let's wire up this toggle complete, and that goes into this on click here. Okay, so we should be good to go now. So we should be able to trigger this from 2 different places now. So let's hit F5 and see how I have done. Start session. Okay, so if I click start there, that's still counting down. That's fine. Let's reload the screen, and let's try ticking here. And it's counting down from 3 minutes 20 seconds. So that's good. So we're now communicating with this component from multiple locations, and obviously this service could be injected anywhere that we want. So this is a pretty good outcome now. We actually have something that's a more robust architecture. However, it started me thinking. I successfully did this bit, and then I moved on to implementing something else. So if we just go back and look at the app again, I started implementing this logic here for binding values, and so we've got more complex data going on here. So I started thinking about, well, how am I going to represent that? And let's just explore some concepts in here. So if I go into my countdown timer state, let's say that we needed to have a user as a property in here. So if I create a public class user and we put on it a ID and a name, and then we're going to expose that user in here. So let me just create a prop, and it's going to be user, and we will just call it user, and we will make it private set for now. Now this seems like it's going to be okay. However, if you think about it, at the moment this user is mutable, and so I could change name on here and no one would know about it. No one would be notified that the name has changed. So that's obviously not good. So we're going to have to make this immutable. So let's try that. So let's make it that you can only do it, you can only set the values during initialization. So that's fine. So how do we now change the name? Well, we're now going to need to define a method on here, which is update the name, which is quite similar to some concepts that you might have seen before, especially if you come from a React background. You might have heard of Redux, where you've got actions against immutable state. So I've defined some immutable state. I'm now going to have some actions to actually modify, well, you can't modify immutable state, create a new state based on the previous state. So this is starting to send us down the direction of something that's already been done before in React. I'm even starting to use the same language now when I'm thinking about it. I've got immutable state, I've got actions that are acting on those state, and if you think about what that action is going to do, well, you're going to take your state, you're going to take your action, and you're going to reduce that information into some new state. So we've now got something that's behaving like a reducer on here. So I said there's a better way, and there is a better way, and what I want to do after the break is show you that better way. I tried to carry on with this route for a while, and what I realized is that it would be really, really easy to make a mistake, and especially if you've got a development team where someone starts working on this, it would be very easy for them to mutate something without realizing the consequences of that. So let's have a 5-minute break, let's have some more pizza and beer, and then I will show you what the better way is after the break. Thank you.
Nice.
Cool.
Going well.
Oh, it's hot work.
Yeah. I'll put a break in here. I won't record this.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, going well.
Cool.
It's really interesting.
Okay. Thank you.
From a slightly mobile perspective, like property change design pattern was very similar to the identified property change. Mobile.
Yeah.
Interesting that I guess it makes sense to reuse that for Blazor, isn't it? But interesting.
Yeah.
I've not done very much at all other than kind of built a big sample app for a dotNet demo. Specific just I open up the page and call a REST API and express details of the page. It's very simple stuff. So this is interesting. I'll definitely clone your repo and poke around with it later.
Cool. So I'm going to get some more water.
Do you zoom in a bit on Visual Studio?
Sorry. Yes, okay. I did. Let me just see. Did it lose it? I set the font to. Before I set it to. So if I was 16.
Okay, I just set up, but
Is it still? It's too small, is it? Let me. All right. Let's see what width is a good size then.
So actually, if you just do bottom left, wherever it is.
Oh, I can do that bit. Yeah, but then you have to do it on each.
You have to do it.
I think you have to do it on each page, don't you? Do you? I don't know. Let's see. Oh no, no, it
No,
did
no,
keep it.
that's
Oh, okay,
that's
cool. No, that's fine. All right, I'll just leave it like that then.
yeah. I think you can type a value in as well if that's too much. So you
Yeah.
want
Is
to
that is that good enough?
yeah,
Can you-
that's plenty. I mean, it was just on the edge where it was.
Okay. All right. Cheers.
Half my age.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. We're all there. Yeah.
I had that. I got myself a 4K screen. It's like, great, I can't beat anything. When you drag Windows from it, 200%, it's fine. And then there's the mouse that just don't play nicely like that. It's just too Thank you very well. Yes, yes, that's a very scripted. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So, that's fine. So I did my interview sort of just before lockdown, and then I started. Interesting time to change job.
I've been lucky that I can do about like 5 or 6 years.
That's perfect. What's the doing?
I'm consulting freelancing still, but I've got one client, that's the master's over, and then that's where it's hard.
So you using coding essentially? Or?
Yeah, that's flag. So kind of came there to start get the project over the line, and so long as we did the project from that.
Oh, great. Yes, nice.
Well, yeah, no. Get to that point. I'm basically 5 years. What's the difference? Yeah. The same. Without it's really hard to sit in a room and not feel I know a few people. There's a lot of people who never see this book. Yeah, that's really nice. That first time that. Well, I mean, next we've got 90 bits. Sign the blue dollars piece to our business. But we haven't done this things yet. We've got 2 more lined up already, so yeah. Well, I think right door That's more stage bag and it matters time to time, but don't be very little value. It's the doctor is that's like this. Quite happy to not too much.
Kids ages.
5, 9, 11. 9 is clear.
I'm just learning the old change. I got for this.
Three is especially homeschooling in Roxy. That was
Tough for the ones, wasn't it?
how old are you?
So then I 13, 10.
Okay.
So, yeah,
Similar age. Yeah.
Yeah. It's just practicing. I don't know, weird situations. Bedtime stories.
Yes.
You know, little one much rather play a game or like. Only wants to sleep like after 9:30 at night. So, by the whole evening. One parent can go off on their own for a little while. My daughter's just old enough to like the girls and the boys for a short time, you know, we're not quite there. Just got the professional. Someday. So we could have like a bit of a station or whatever. Like we've had it. They always quiet. Where are you been? Okay. We were going to do that. We kind of doing everyone was doing Oh, wow. It's like, don't have to get on that. You're like this. Why am I often feeling that's it was even a laptop when I used to take this originally like to this
Okay, everyone, shall we gather back? Make sure this is getting still. Are we all back? Yep, cool. Okay, so I said that there is a better way, and I think that better way is a library that is called Fluxa. So Fluxa is based on the flux pattern. Now, you might not have heard of the flux pattern, but you've probably heard of Redux. Redux is based on the flux pattern. Redux isn't a pattern itself. Now, the flux pattern was created by Facebook trying to solve a problem which you might remember from maybe, I guess it probably maybe 10 years ago or so now, which is that you would have your little notification icon which would tell you how many notifications you had, and that might say that you've got 5 notifications, but when you click on it, you didn't have those 5 notifications, you might have only had 2. And the components in Facebook were getting out of sync. And so Facebook needed a way to have a single source of truth, a single store for your state, and then different components would be listening to what they care about that state. So your notification icon, all it cared about is the count of notifications, whereas when you click on the notifications, you want to see a list of all your notifications. So you've got different components that are listening to updates from the same single source of truth, the same state, but they have different points of view on that particular state. So this library was written in dotNet called Fluxa. It doesn't have to run in Blazor. It can actually run in anything, but there is the web version that runs in Blazor. So this is what we're going to be taking a look at in the second part of this talk. So what I want to do first of all is just show you a diagram of what the intended architecture is going to look like now. So let's just get that full screen and we will talk about what we've got going on here. So we have a state. This is our single source of truth. So this is going to store, and it's going to hold our timer state in it. And the state is going to flow in one direction. It's going to flow to this page, which is then going to update. There is no way for this page to directly update this immutable state. It has to flow all the way around here, which we'll show you now. So we've got two buttons here. We've got our start button there, and then we've got our clicking on any of these buttons. And both of those we want to trigger an action. So one of the actions is just start, and the other action is start with a duration. So that's very similar to the service that we had before, but this time we've defined it as an action. The reason we've defined it as an action is we're going to pass that action to the dispatcher, and then the dispatcher is going to decide where it's going to farm out that work to. So we have a number of reducers here, and you can have multiple reducers that are listening to the same action and doing different things. So if we go back to the Facebook example, you're going to have one reducer which is actually just going to reduce the list of notifications to a number, whereas you're going to have a separate reducer that's going to display a list of notifications. So different reducers can go up to different states. That's perfectly fine. So we've got three different reducers here. We've got one for starting with duration, one for just starting, and then we've got another reducer which is to deal with actually updating the time that they're displaying here. So that is this set duration action. Now this is going off in a slightly different direction here, because reducers, they need to be pure functions. A reducer, you want to be able to test it, and if you put in the same information, you should always get the same information out. There should be no side effects, and they shouldn't be getting any information from anywhere else. It should all be self-contained within that pure function. I've got some state, I've got a request to do something to it, and we reduce that into a new state. Whereas we are in the real world, we need to do things. So we might need to go off to an API and get some information. We might need to, in our case, start a timer that's going to be running constantly and updated. So we don't want a timer manually changing this state. That's not allowed. What we're going to do is we're going to have a side effect here, and this side effect is going to be just like our service that's got a timer in it, and every millisecond it is going to dispatch an action which is set a new duration. So it's going to be constantly dispatching, but it's being a good system. It's still fitting within this ecosystem. It might be a side effect, and it might be doing other things asynchronously, but ultimately it's going to dispatch an action which is going to go to the dispatcher, be reduced, and ultimately create a new state for our UI to update. So let's take a look at how we're going to implement this. Let's go back to the code and let's jump to Fluxa getting, no, not Fluxa getting started, ready to integrate Fluxa. Okay, one thing I forgot to tell you is how you install Fluxa. So if we go back to the instructions here, it tells you how to install it using the NuGet packages. We've got some pretty good documentation going on here. It takes you through the pattern, and then there's some tutorials which cover the basic concepts and then how that actually is implemented in the web. At the end of the talk, I'll show you a couple of really good tutorials on this that I worked through, and they really take you on the journey of using Fluxa and learning it very well. So yeah, I'll point those out at the end. Okay, so let's take a look at what we've got in here now. So what I've done is I've created a folder called Countdown Timer now, and inside there I've got a folder called Components, and there I've put my timer. At the moment the timer is empty, it's ready to be wired up, but there's nothing in it. We also now have a store folder, and this is where we're going to add the different parts that we need in order to build up our Fluxa system. So the first thing that we need is immutable state. So I've defined that. Again, there's no point in me writing this in front of you because you've seen these three properties multiple times before now. We've got a public record because records are going to make our life a lot easier when we get to reducing, and we'll get to that bit soon. I've made it immutable, so each of these properties have an initializer as their setter, so they can only be created during initialization, and that's it. You can have a constructor on here if you want, that's perfectly fine. The only thing that Fluxa wants is that it needs an empty private constructor in order to do its magic in the background, because if you're telling it that I've got this immutable state, it needs to create an initial version of that state before it then does any change detection, so it needs that initial state. The other thing that I've done is I've put this attribute on it which tells Fluxa that this is a feature state that we're going to be using. So what it's going to do here is it's going to create a store, and then in that store it's going to create a copy, an instance, sorry, of this record with the initial values in it. So by putting this on here, we are telling Fluxa that this is our immutable state that we want to use. You can do a more manual way here, so you can actually define a store yourself, and you can even do the initialization of your state yourself. But if you're happy for Fluxa to do all that for you, then it can do the hard work, and there's nothing more to do here. So let's just wire this up in the components. Let's just go to the component, and we are going to do a couple of things in here. The first thing that we're going to do is we're going to need to inherit from a Fluxa component. Now, you don't have to do this, so if you don't want, it'd be nice if I could spell. What have I done? Inherits, it's not giving me Fluxa components. No, components. Let's hope that works. Yeah, the syntax is right there. Okay, so we're going to inherit from Fluxa component. As I said, you don't have to do it, but if you do, then it does the wiring up for you, and it also does the disposing for you at the end, so you don't have to unsubscribe to anything. What I mean by what wiring up it does for you, what we're going to do in here is we're going to inject. What's gone wrong? Oh, here we go, we've got something now. I'm going to inject a I state, and it's going to be of the timer state, and we will call it state. Okay, so what the Fluxa component is going to do at runtime is it's going to scan this component, and it's going to look for any I state that's been injected, and it's going to subscribe to this state automatically, and then in the dispose it's going to unsubscribe to this state. So this gives you a lot of useful features for free. What it means now is in here I can do at state dot, something's broken, hasn't it?
Use the build, just switch to the boundary Fluxa.
Let's see. That's a good point. Let's just get rid of that. Ooh, yeah, okay. Oh. It was going so well, wasn't it? I don't want to resolve conflicts. Okay, let's jump to something else. Discard changes. Yeah. And let's go back and let's see if we're there now. Let's do a build. No. Oh, it says build succeeded. Okay, so let's try again. Let's quickly inject the, not inject, inherits. getting anything? We're not, are we? Right, what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump to the next component where this has already been filled out for us. Okay, so I've injected the component. I've inherited the component. I've injected the state, and then what I'm now doing is state.value dot, and then I have access to the immutable state. So we've got the duration, and again I'm just doing a toString on it as before. So that's the state wired up, but at the moment we have no way of asking for that state to be modified. So the way we're going to do that is by defining some actions. So in the store, I've now got a actions class that I've added into here. And in this actions class, I've got in this actions file, I've got 3 records. I've got one for starting an action, for starting the timer. I've got one for starting the timer with a duration, and I've got one for setting the actual duration. So these are the 3 different actions that we need to be able to dispatch. So let's actually go ahead and dispatch those now. So if I just take a copy of this action and go into the timer, what we're going to do now is we're going to inject a dispatcher. So I'm going to do inject dispatcher. We have not. I've probably broken something, haven't I? Let's move on to where we are. So I've injected the dispatcher. So now in the handle start, is it going to allow this? Am I going to have to fix my merge errors? Let's see if we can build. Countdown. Oh, okay. Let's resolve that. No. Time session dot countdown timer dot components. Right, there must be something wrong in here. What is that? I'm just going to try and build again out of sheer desperation.
Nearly using for the Fluxa stuff.
That's I shouldn't do. Let's just try and jump forwards and see if we can get to a point where it does work. Everything was working, so I think what I might end up doing is just closing Visual Studio down and reopening it and see if it, yeah, there's something bug. Damn it, no, yeah. Ironically, this has never gone wrong in all of the practice runs that I have done. So, yeah. Let's take a look. Let's see what happens. One of the things I was going to mention is how awful the feedback is when you make a coding error. I was going to give you an example of not putting the correct number of closing brackets on a bit of code and showing you the stupid error messages. that it gives you, but I think we're getting enough of an experience of that already, so I don't really need to do that. But just missing one bracket will completely ruin everything, and the error message that it will give you is utter nonsense. Right, okay, so we're working again, even though we weren't working before. So let's go back to actions, and let's see if that works. Let's see if we still build. Right, we do. I'm going to change that to 130% maybe. That's slightly more readable for me. Where am I? So I'm in the timer. And do we have our actions defined? We do. So let's inject dispatcher. That's much nicer, isn't it? This is one of the reasons why, in conclusion, I would recommend that you don't actually use Blazor in a corporate environment at the moment. I'm doing the talk on it, and that's my view at the moment. I would say that this is great for a hobby project, which is exactly what I'm using it for. But personally, I would not adopt it quite yet. It's come on a long way, but it's still got some way to go. And I think even when I do this bit now, the IntelliSense, not dispatcher, is it? The IntelliSense that you get and some of these situations is pretty rubbish. So new action, yeah, object action. Well, that's not right. And what I actually do need to put in here is start time, and it's going to be date time UTC now, because if we were working over midnight, we wouldn't want the timer to suddenly get confused. Right, now one thing that I've done here is I've actually had to inject the now into this action, and that's because in the reducer we don't want it to access date time, because that's a side effect and it would then make that reducer untestable. So we need to pass all of the information in that the reducer is going to use. Now it does mean that this code here isn't the best code to look at. So what some people do is they actually create a facade layer, and the facade layer would be called something like countdown timer facade, and you would just have a method on it called start. The facade would have the dispatcher injected into it, and then in the facade code you would have this code here. So down at this level you would just be calling facade.start, which is nicer to read. You've got a whole extra class to deal with though in here, and there's already quite a lot of code to write for this particular library, so it's up to you if you want to make your code slightly more readable, but you know, obviously you're going to have to do more work. So I've dispatched in here. There's one other place that we need to dispatch, and that is in the main section. So let's go to the main section and let's inject a dispatcher in here as well. Now this particular component doesn't inherit from the Fluxa component. It doesn't know anything about it, but the dispatcher is just a thing to inject like anything else, so there's nothing wrong with doing this. And then down in here we can just call dispatcher.dispatch, and this time we are going to do the one with the duration. So we will do oops, I'm in the wrong place there. So we will do new that, and this time we are going to need a start time of date time UTC now, and we are going to have a duration of new time span, and we will do that as 3 minutes and 20 seconds. And this is the point where I normally get the number of brackets wrong at the end, and we get a really silly error message. So let's see if that compiles. Okay, so that's everything that we need now to dispatch the actions that we want. The next thing that we're going to need is a reducer in order to deal with these particular requests. I'm going to move on to the next one to show you that. And let's take a look at what our reducer is. Okay, so the first thing to point out is that our reducer is a static class. So that's going to help us behave ourselves to begin with. We're not going to be injecting anything into here. If we take a look at a particular method, so on start, then it takes in our current state. It takes in the action, which is the start action. And we have put the attribute reducer method on it. So Fluxa knows that this is a method that the dispatcher can dispatch our action to. Now, the nice thing of using a record type is that we can now return that state with the changes that we want. So this is really, really nice syntax that we've got here. And up until records were provided, then the syntax here would have been really, really nasty. So this is a really great progression that we've got in C# that we can do this. So the logic here is pretty much the same for the start with the duration. We're going to return the state with start time and with the duration. And then we finally got the one other reducer method, which is to set the actual duration. So we've got a mutable state, we've got actions to reduce the state. We've now got the reducers that are going to actually reduce it. The final thing that we now need is the effects class that's actually going to have the timer in it and actually tick and dispatch the set duration. So let's move on to the final one, which is effects. And let's take a look at that. Okay, so in the countdown effects, we've got very similar code to what you've seen before. We've got a timer. We're injecting the state and we're injecting a dispatcher. And then if we go down to the on timer elapsed, well, the logic's practically the same in there. We're going to calculate the duration using the same maths that we did before, but this time we can't obviously modify the state directly because it's immutable. We're going to dispatch an action to update the duration. So we're dispatching the set duration action and we're passing in the new duration. Now, the other thing that the effects does is it's going to be listening to a couple of requests. It's going to be listening to the start action and it's going to be listening to the start action with a duration. And for both of those, it's going to do exactly the same thing. It's just going to start the timer. That's all it's interested in. So we've now got absolutely everything in place and wired up. So hopefully if we press F5 now, we can see exactly the same as what we saw before, but we're doing it with the Fluxa way. So if I click start here, we've got our countdown, which is great. And if I tick here, then we're triggering the countdown too. So we've got both ways of doing things, and it's now doing it the Fluxa way. So if you think about it, this state, a new state object is being created every millisecond here, and the Blazor is updating the UI, and that's all happening quite nicely. Fluxa plays nicely with Redux DevTools, so you can use the time travel features in the DevTools to move forwards and backwards based on the interaction you've had with the UI, which is absolutely brilliant for working out what's going on. So that's really nice. Yes, question?
This Teams giving you a refresh rate.
Does it look a bit rubbish? Oh wow, yes. Okay, so it works on my computer. Honestly, look at it. Look how fast it's going. Yeah. Yeah. I didn't think I would have to say it works on my computer in a presentation before. Uh, okay, so I've taken you through Fluxa. The reason that I did the first half of this presentation, not only to sort of show you the mistakes that I made, but to show you the amount of code that needed to be written using other ways to then contrast it with what we just did. We have had to write quite a lot of code for this Fluxa approach, but what it's doing is it's preventing you making mistakes that you could really easily make using the other approaches. It would be very easy to slip up, whereas with this way you can't. You've got immutable state. The only way you can modify it is by an action being dispatched. I mentioned at the beginning that I had a conversation with the chat about this, and I'm going to now show you that conversation. So I asked chat to tell me about state management for Blazor. I'm not very fast at typing, but because of the refresh rate on here, that's probably not a bad thing. So the answer that it gives is the talk that I just did. It tells you that there's several ways of doing it. So a component can have its own state. Well, that's the first approach that I took. You could use a shared state manager. Well, that's the second approach I took. Or you could use a centralized state management tool like Fluxa. That's the third approach I took. So I'm really glad that I didn't ask chat about this beforehand. As I said, I think it would have knocked my confidence a bit. There's one final thing I want to do before I show you the slides, which is my confidence was pretty low, but then I came across this and it gave me a little bit of hope. I'm using the AI. I'm fine. So make sure you're using the AI too. You need to be replacing other people rather than them replacing you. So I think that is that's actually true. And if you play chess, you know that you can never win against an AI. However, if you play chess with the AI against someone else that's either a human being or AI, you can win. A human and AI together is better than just AI. So that I think is going to be the way that we move forward here. So just to go back to the non-slides. In my GitHub repo, there is a Blazor Beyond demo code talk, and all of my code is in here. I also have links to Blazor, to the Fluxa component, and then to the two tutorials that I mentioned. So one of them is by Eric King. And what's really interesting in this one is the creator of Fluxa gets involved in the conversation in these tutorials, and they have a bit of to and fro on some points of view on the way to do things. So this is a really, really good tutorial to work through. So that is it for me. Thank you very much for coming.